I helped the first ever female Director General in the MOD pass a panel interview with a gentleman called Sir Jock Stirrup. And she said, they asked me all the questions you asked me. And I'm like, how could I do that? I've never, ever worked in the MOD, never known anything particularly about the British Army. Really made me think that actually this could be a superpower.
This is Liz Harris. She used to be a corporate communications coach, specializing in presentations, but one day she discovered something unexpected, and that completely changed her career. She discovered that she has this uncanny ability to predict the exact questions that people get in their job interviews. Soon, recruiters started calling her their secret weapon. And today, as an independent career and interview coach, Liz helps her clients land their dream jobs using her unique system. In this podcast, she'll reveal, among other things, her #1 secret for acing management job interviews. One of the previous guests on this podcast left a mystery question for you. But before we get to that, I have a few questions of my own. Imagine you're on a long elevator ride with someone and they ask you what you do as a coach. How would you describe the problem you solve and who your coaching is for?
I help my clients land their dream job by boosting their competence and confidence to perform at their absolute best at all stages of the hiring process.
Interesting. Boosting confidence and competence in an interview process. Coaching often involves helping people break free from limiting beliefs or lies we tell ourselves. So I wonder, what's a lie you used to believe about job interviews or confidence in general?
I think if I look back to my younger self going for interviews, walking out without that job, I think I'd tell everyone, oh, well, it wasn't meant to be. It didn't have my name on it. They'd already decided who they were going to appoint. I think I probably told myself all sorts of things to make it feel better. And looking back, I think, did I really put the hard yards in? Did I do the homework? Did I do the prep? I think winging it, I think I was probably somebody who thought I can walk into an interview and wow them and wing it. And if it didn't work, my wowing and winging, then, it wasn't my fault. It was probably their fault. They'd already decided someone else had the job.
Interesting. What got you started on your coaching journey? Was there a particular experience or a moment that inspired your passion for helping people prepare for job interviews?
It is interesting. I love looking back at those sort of turning point, sliding door type moments. So I've been a trainer facilitator for many, many years and specializing in presentations, influencing and leadership. And I was talking to one of my clients, a lady called Wendy, and she said, Liz, have you got a minute? Can we have a quick chat? So I said, well, yeah, of course. And she took me into this empty meeting room and she told me about her 2 daughters. She said, I need to tell you about Lexi and Sophie, and they're, my beautiful daughters. They're both recently graduated, but it's breaking my heart to see them sending out, 100 CVs a week and not getting any replies or any responses. And Liz, I want you to help them. And I was like, but, Wendy, I'm ever so sorry to hear about the girls. I really am. But that's not really my thing. And she said, but it is, Liz. It is, because every interview is a presentation and every presentation is an interview. So I feel confident that you can help them. So I thought, okay, well, let me try it. Let me work with them. So they were both at slightly different stages, but I ran my relationships with them as a project, each different project. They wanted different things from different jobs, and we met each week, and, I just kept them. And the first thing I told them to do was stop sending out all those CVs. We're not going to do it. I just instinctively, I felt that was really, the wrong way to look at it. And cut a long story short, when they phoned me, Lexi phoned first and she said, Liz, you're not going to believe it. I've got the job. And Sophie about 3 or 4 weeks later, the same. And I was just so thrilled for them. It really made the hairs stand up on my arms. And I thought, well, I work with groups a lot, and I help them build their training, their presentations. I help them lead better. I help them influence others. But this was really life changing. And I thought, I would like more of this. This is really, instead of working with big groups and hoping that they're going to take away the ideas, working with individuals, being on their team and staying with them until they get that fantastic, we're delighted to tell you you've got the job moment.
Amazing. So you had this presentation background, doing trainings and presentation, right? And then you kind of fell into this coaching by accident almost.
Yeah, it was one of those great moments. And actually from there I began thinking, okay, I want to do. So I kind of put the word out to friends of friends. And, so I started doing more and more of it. And really began to prove the concept, that it actually does dramatically increase your chances of landing your dream job if you have some professional help or somebody on your team with you.
So I'm curious, what did you do with those two girls? I mean, what kind of thing do you think made a difference there in their case?
I began by encouraging them to think about their own brand. So I set them both a challenge to come up with 3 words or phrases that describe them. So if they could only use 3 descriptors, 3 adjectives, how would they describe themselves? And from that brand, I was able to build, to help them build a proposition in terms of how they would respond in interviews, how they would see themselves even. And then I encouraged them to, so 3 words or phrases. Then the next list I wanted from them was 6 companies they would each kill to work for. I want to know, who do they want on their CV? Not just any job, which job, and who did they want to align their personal brand with on their CV. And then we started doing it. It was felt more like detective work. So really finding people, using LinkedIn, finding people within those organizations who maybe had a similar career path. So Sophie, for example, she had studied politics and history, but she really wanted to go into the tourism sector. She was a very gifted photographer. So I encouraged her to set up her own website with some of her photography, which was really beautiful. And then we found someone in an organization who'd also had an unusual career path. I don't remember what he studied, but it definitely wasn't anything to do with tourism or marketing. And so we crafted an email to him to say, I've had a look at your profile. You followed a trajectory that I'm very similar, that she wanted to follow as well. Would he be kind enough to offer her a mentoring session for 45 minutes, at the time of his choosing? And, he did. He was generous and kind enough. I think people are slightly flattered, aren't they, if you're approached regarding, could you help me? Could you mentor me? And following that, he said, on Friday, we've got a team meeting. I'd like you to come and meet the team. He said, it's not an interview. I just want you to, to meet the team. And actually, it kind of was an interview. And she built the relationship from there. She did some temporary work for them, and then they offered her a permanent upgrade. So yeah, it was sort of project management, detective work, being creative, thinking laterally, really anything but sending out 100 CVs to people who haven't even asked for them, don't even know what your proposition is or what you stand for.
Wow, fascinating. What's a seemingly trivial decision in your career that ended up having a big impact on how you coach job candidates today?
I think having followed on from the freebies I was doing for friends and friends of friends, I sat there one day and thought, who are the gatekeepers for candidates? And I thought that's recruiters. So I got a list of recruiters in my area and I just kind of went through the list and phoned up and said, this is what I'm doing. I'm looking to prove the concept. I'm confident I can add value to your candidates. And I had so many no's and so many doors slammed in my face. It was fascinating to see that they did not want me anywhere near their candidates. So I was a bit surprised at that. And then I met Caroline, a fabulous, open-minded recruiter who said, yeah, I'll give you a go. And so what I did for her and her candidates was always 2 to 3 days before, no nearer the interview, but no further ahead either, she would send me the job description, the CV, obviously with their permission, the CV and job description, and I would prepare 3 kind of buckets of questions. So I would prepare some questions around their CV. So I would look at the CV. I would look at the job description and think, okay, so what competency-based questions can I ask there? And then I developed, and I still add to it to this day, a list of what I call curveball questions. So things that just might trigger you, trip you up, be unexpected or less expected. And so I developed this 1 hour. It just always took 60 minutes. I don't know why or how, but it always did. So I did my preparation. I worked through the biographical questions, the competency based as well. So showed them the star, what we call the star matrix, and how they could answer those story based questions. And then towards the end, I would just fire at them some quirky left field type questions so that they could really get used to being able to, think on the spot. One of the things we might come back to is I like to help people respond rather than react. So if we're reacting, there isn't enough thinking time in it, and it might only be literally half a second, but it could be the difference between saying the right thing and the wrong thing. And the thing that fascinated me was the times they spoke to me after the interview and said, do you know, they asked me every question you asked me? So I thought, actually, I'm quite good at this. I'm quite good at anticipating what questions you're going to get on your CV and which of the competencies they're going to major on and those quirky ones. And it wasn't long before Caroline was calling me her secret weapon. So she was just thrilled with the uplift in confidence. Like I said at the beginning, confidence and competence. So I'm a real pragmatist. It's not just about saying, yay, well done, you're going to be great. It's saying, let's get you 110% ready. And they all said, oh, thank goodness I had those sessions. I was so rusty. I hadn't had an interview for a while. I used to do this, well, I still do, but this time out. So I'd ask a question. I remember saying to someone, so what attracts you to this role? And he said, well, I've probably got one more job left in me. I've been in dairy all my life. I thought I'd move into baking. And I'm like, time out. Are you seriously going to say, let's rework that. Let's think that one through again, so put the brakes on. Let's reset it. But imagine if that was his first answer, he'd be out the door within, they'd be like, right, next. So I developed this real process, if you like. So my prep plus, some biographical competency curveball. And they're all saying, wow, I feel so much more excited about the interview, so much more equipped and confident and competent.
Amazing. So I think it's fair to say if the recruiter called you her secret weapon, it's fair to say you have a bit of a superpower there that enables you to correctly predict all those not just the standard questions, but also the curveball questions.
I mean, the one that really made me think that actually this could be a superpower. I helped the first ever female director general in the MOD pass a panel interview with a gentleman called Sir Jock Stirrup, so who at the time was, one of the highest people in the British Army. And she said, they asked me all the questions you asked me. And I'm like, how could I do that? I've never, ever worked in the MOD, never known anything particularly about the British Army. But, there's only a certain number of questions that you could put to someone, I guess. But yeah, it is quite intriguing. And maybe going back to my presentation skills training, I have run literally hundreds of presentation skills courses. And whenever they do their live presentations, it could be on any subject, huge range of subjects. And I had to pretend to be a member of the audience and ask, a half intelligent question. And I think that training really helped me because some people say, I know this much, this much depth about this many topics, so I can ask 4 or 5 really targeted questions about the widest range of subjects. So I think that's really stood me in good stead for working with a wide range of candidates.
Awesome. If you could sum up your coaching philosophy in just a few words, especially around preparing candidates for management role interviews, what would it be?
I am a pragmatist. So I don't want to give you theory. I don't want to burden you with methodology. Maybe it's a bit like somebody learning to drive. If you're a learner driver and you've got your test coming up, it doesn't matter how many people who say to you, you're going to be great. It's going to be brilliant. To me, I've got a dual control car. Shall we jump in it and practice, practice, practice? So that's all about concrete outcomes. I'm not here to blow smoke up your proverbial. I want to work with you so that, I've had candidates say to me, do you know, the interview with you, Liz, was far harder than the interview I actually had. And to me, I've done my job. Because if you think, God, this is a breeze compared to what Liz put me through, then isn't that better? That I say, right, let's do the reversing around the corner again and again and again, rather than you're going to be great. And then they come out going, actually, I messed up on the reversing around the corner.
Yeah. What's a common misconception about job interviews, especially for management roles, that you wish more people understood?
I think there's a misconception that people believe interviewers are trying to catch you out or trip you up. And don't get me wrong, there was a time when that was the case. In the 80s, there was all sorts of stories about people putting a bag of flour on top of a door and opening it and it lands on you. And how do you cope with that? Ridiculous. But I don't think they're trying to catch you out or trip you up. I think they're trying to get to the real you. They want to know that it's not a performance, but they're actually meeting the real person. So it's about prep. I will say this over and over again. It's doing your homework, doing your preparation, but also being able to be present and relaxed and confident and, believe that they really want you to do well and they want to meet the real you and they want to find out if the real you could be a member of their tribe. Are you someone who's going to fit in, add value, bring difference? I think it's dissuading people from thinking it's a big trap. It's an opportunity to have a peer-to-peer discussion and exchange. It may well be that you don't like the sound of that organization, you don't share their values, and that actually it's not where you should be heading.
When you start working with someone who feels unprepared or nervous about their upcoming job interview, what are the biggest challenges you notice they need to address first?
I think it's that sort of catch-22 that first impressions are so important, but that at the beginning of your interview, you are at your most nervous. So I think interviews are sort of funnel shaped. So they start with a big, broad question and then they go down to specifics. And when you get to the specifics, you're like, yeah, I know that. I did that job. But this big, broad question is often, we've had a look at your CV. There's a lot there to interest us, but in your own words, tell us about yourself. And, when you're nervous, you can just gabble. And often people say, oh, what do you want to know? Do you want to know about me as a professional, me outside of work? And that question is so pivotal that if you can nail it, then I think you go up from there. If you fluff it, you're climbing back to neutral. You're in the minus. You've got to get back to the positive. So I guess if you ask the question differently, and I only had 15 minutes to work with someone or 20 minutes to work with them, I would work on that tell me about yourself question. And actually, I love working on it with people because I help people see what I call the red thread in their career. So what joins it all together? And I might even start with them from, okay, tell me about you when you were 7, or what school subjects did you really love? How did you choose your subjects at university? I remember a guy saying, oh, well, I was always taking things apart, and I can remember I would have a machine, in bits on the kitchen table, and my mum would say, get that cleared away because it's time for tea, So that's how he went into, he had this curiosity, this fascination about how things come apart, go back together. And that was his red thread. And that's much more intriguing to an interviewer than I left school and I went into university and then I fell into this and fell into that, so I really want them to be able to tell their own story. And sometimes they've never seen it that way and they've never thought, my God, yeah, it was a bit like Lexi and Sophie, studying politics and history did have something to tell me about researching and curiosity and loving detail and data.
So that seemingly innocent question, like, tell me about yourself, at the beginning of a job interview, that seemingly innocent question is actually what trips many people up, right?
Absolutely. And, it breaks my heart to think that your interview could be over within 4 minutes because everything, your non-verbals, everything's leaked. You've looked away, you're blinking at 100 miles an hour, you're, touching your hair, or, all of this leakage, in those first few minutes, your hiring team is going to think, oh, crikey, we want this person to be a senior member of staff. We want them to speak up in meetings, that speak in presentations and conferences. And, they've fallen at the first hurdle. So, I really want them to be able to say, I'm really glad you asked me that. Let me tell you a little story about the 7-year-old me who used to I just love the idea that they're going to hit the ground running. They're going to have a really fast start. They're going to be confident, make such a great first impression that the hiring team are eager to hear more from them.
What's the most unconventional piece of advice you've ever given or received about acing a job interview or building confidence?
Well, I can think of a piece of unconventional advice that wouldn't help you ace your interview, and that is to treat an interview as if it's a first date. I've heard that 2 or 3 times and quite recently, and I don't think the parallels are helpful enough. There's definitely a different power battle going on, and you're not looking to marry them, settle down, have a family. And that person may be your boss and may not. It might be the HR director, or it's unconventional, but I don't think it's helpful.
All right, here's a fun question. If you were an animal, which animal would you be? Or put another way, what's your spirit animal when it comes to helping people feel confident and prepared to ace their job interviews?
When I was a young girl, I wasn't one of these pony club girls, but I did do some horse riding. And I can remember riding along Redcar Beach in North Yorkshire, which is a massive beach, miles wide, miles long. And you could really, you could get some speed up. There was no fear of, you didn't have to jump anything. And I just thought, wow, that relationship between a human and a horse, when it's right, it's seamless and you can make so much progress together. I would have to pick a horse.
Interesting. And so fitting. What's a question you wish more clients asked you about preparing for a high stakes job interview?
They should ask me, or perhaps I do wish they asked me, is, so Liz, if I only had 20 minutes to focus on one piece of preparation, what should I focus on? And I would get them to really, really think about that first impression and to nail that question. Tell me about yourself.
Absolutely. So important. All right, it's time for the mystery question left by one of the previous guests for you. So here it is. How would you get a child who is under the age of 10 interested in business?
I think I would take them to a car boot sale and set up a stall and talk to them about supply and demand. I think schools and universities don't give people enough practical, relatable advice to help them with the day-to-day commercial world.
For someone who feels completely overwhelmed by the idea of interviewing for a management role, what's the first step you recommend to help them feel more confident?
I read recently from the Chartered Institute of Leadership and Management that here in the UK, 82% of managers have no formal qualifications. So I think I'd have two bits of advice. Firstly, ditch the imposter syndrome. Don't worry if you haven't got an MBA or a leadership qualification, you're in good company. So ditch the imposter syndrome. And secondly, figure out what your management philosophy is. So if somebody asked you, what's your philosophy on management? You've got a really great answer. And I think the best way to reflect on your philosophy is to think of two people in your career that you've worked for, your worst boss and your best boss, and think about what did you get from each one? What did you find out what not to do from your worst boss, and how that person made you feel and how much of you showed up at work for that person, versus your best boss. What did they do? What made you want to come to work, to give the best of yourself? And from that, decide what have you adopted as your management leadership philosophy, and what are you conscious to avoid? What do you make sure that you never do because you know how crushing and demotivating and diminishing it is? So ditch the imposter syndrome and decide on your philosophy.
Awesome. Is there a book, a practice, or a habit that has been transformative for you or your clients in preparing for job interviews or building confidence?
Interestingly enough, I found in a second-hand bookshop a book called Why You by James Reed. And weirdly enough, this morning as I was getting ready, James Reed was on the radio being interviewed about the state of recruitment and the job market. So I think he wrote this book in about 2014. The subheading is 101 Questions You Will Never Fear Again. And it's a great Bible for what if I get this question? What if I get that question? So yeah, that's been really helpful for me, and it's been really, really helpful for my interview coaching clients as well.
What's one simple thing job candidates can start doing today to improve their chances of acing their next management role interview?
Do you know, I love that question because I remember watching an interview with Lutalo Mohammed, who is a Taekwondo athlete. And he was asked the question, how do you get ready for the big competitions, like the Commonwealth Games or the Olympics? And he said, I don't get ready, I am ready. And I just thought that was fantastic. And that's what I would really encourage people to think about. Don't wait for the interview before you start getting interview ready. And something like 45% of vacancies are filled through networking. So you're actually going for interviews whenever you meet somebody new, whenever you go to a meeting or a presentation or a conference. Don't do this thing without being mindfully aware that this could all be feeding into your next career move.
That makes a lot of sense. If you could teach only one lesson to all your clients about succeeding in job interviews, what would it be?
Be yourself. And the only way you can be yourself is if you are 100% prepared. You've done your homework, you feel super confident. That frees you up and that allows you to be you and to showcase your best you.
What are you most excited about in your work right now?
The thing that I think about night and day at the moment is my new book. So I am partway through writing up all of my thoughts, my techniques, my philosophy. I've called it the 5 ways to wow at interview. And those 5 ways map exactly over my one-to-one coaching. I just want to get it out to more people. So yeah, I'm really excited about becoming a published author as well as a successful candidate coach.
If you could leave our listeners with one piece of advice to remember long after this episode, especially about preparing for life-changing job interviews, what would it be?
I would want them, this is going to sound a bit odd, but I'd want them to do some maths. What I mean by that is, let's say the next role you're going for is the salary's £80,000, euros, dollars, whatever. And you ask yourself, how long are you likely to be there in that role? So let's say 5 years. If you did the maths, if you multiplied 80,000 by 5, you get to 400,000. So that's a big chunk of family income. If you were pitching for a contract worth 400,000, would you consider employing a coach to help you pitch for that? So I would want to encourage people to say, this is a big deal. This is a big deal to you, to your family, to your future. Get professional help. Get somebody on your side working with you to maximize that opportunity.
That math totally makes sense. And now that you put it this way, it becomes obvious. And now I'm curious to hear your mystery question for the next guest. So without knowing who will be the next guest on this podcast, what question would you want them to answer?
I would want them to answer the question, would you do your coaching for free?
Interesting. I'm looking forward to hearing the answer to that question in the next podcast. Liz, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. I hope our listeners and viewers like and share this episode and join us next time on the Top Coaching Leaders podcast.